Medical services in Gaza are currently overwhelmed. As Israel continued bombing Gaza overnight, more and more patients headed to hospitals, many of them children. So I want to show you some of the scenes I've witnessed here in Gaza. But viewer discretion is advised because some of these images are quite graphic. Over the course of this morning, I visited 3 different hospitals. The first one I went to was the El Aqsa Hospital. It's one of the largest hospitals here in Gaza City. It mainly caters for the northern part of the city. And when I arrived there, I found that the hospital was struggling to cope with the number of patients that were coming in. Many of them were children suffering from breathing difficulties. And the hospital staff told me that most of them had been affected by the Israeli airstrike. So I made my way to the pediatric intensive care unit, and there I saw 40 children, all of them under the age of 5 years old, some of them as young as just a few months. They were all hooked up to ventilators. And the reason for that is because their lungs have been very badly damaged due to the ongoing airstrike. Now the hospital has around 1,300 beds, but at the moment, the hospital only has 35 ventilators. So you can imagine how dire the situation really is. Outside the hospital, I also saw dozens of ambulances waiting to get inside. Some of them were carrying stretchers, and some of them were carrying children. I couldn't get into those ambulances because there were patients inside, but I spoke to the drivers and they told me that they'd been waiting for hours to get inside the hospital and to unload the patients. And I then made my way to the pediatric ward. There I saw something that really broke my heart. It was a mass grave where dozens of children had been buried. Some of them had died in the hospital as a result of their injuries. Others had been brought to the hospital, but unfortunately, they had already passed away. One child I spoke to, his name was Osama. He was just 10 years old. He was sitting on his bed and he told me that he lost both of his parents in the fighting. His house had been completely destroyed. And now he was sitting there in his hospital bed totally traumatized. He was crying and he didn't understand what was happening. I then went to a different hospital. This is one of the largest hospitals here in Gaza City. It's a UN-run facility, and I found that the situation there was also extremely dire. There were patients sleeping in the corridors. There was a lack of medical supplies, and I spoke to several doctors who told me that they were struggling to cope with the number of casualties. Many of the patients here are civilians, including women and children, and what they need is urgent medical care. But at the moment, the doctors and the nurses are struggling to cope. They don't have enough ventilators, they don't have enough medicines, and they don't even have enough water to keep the hospital clean. I then went to a third hospital. This one is close to the border with Egypt. It's called the European Gaza Hospital. Again, I found a similar scene. There were patients sleeping in the corridors. Medical staff were extremely busy. There was a complete lack of privacy for patients. And again, they were struggling to get enough supplies. I spoke to the director of the hospital, and he told me that around 3,000 patients had passed through this hospital since the beginning of October. Now, this is just one hospital. It gives you an idea of the scale of the crisis here in Gaza. And what we have here is not just a war. We have a complete breakdown of medical services. The health system here in Gaza is currently overwhelmed. As Israel continued bombing Gaza overnight, more and more patients headed to hospitals, many of them children. So I want to show you some of the scenes I've witnessed here in Gaza. But viewer discretion is advised, because some of these images are quite graphic.